if anybody ever called me and said, hey, we want you to run an internal agency for a performance marketing team, 80-year-old retail fintech out of Dallas, Texas, I would have said, no effing way. No effing way. Does that sound like fun?
So what happens when the Tom Brady of agency client services switches teams to the client side? Well, that's what this episode's all about. We're joined by Michael Catanzaro. He was my former mentor, and we trade war stories about working together where we had to spend time in Cadaver labs doing product research, working on ASICs, working at Petco. And Michael breaks down what it was like to go from the agency side into the client side and build essentially an internal agency or an internal marketing department inside of MoneyGram, which is one of the world's largest companies. This one is a great episode packed with tons of insight of what it takes to actually crack, innovation and take creative risks, particularly if you're in a non-creative environment. So stay tuned. Can't wait for you to meet Michael.
Hey, so let's start here. Zoe, I am so excited to introduce you to Michael Catanzaro. And we worked together light years ago and was just one of my mentors, one of maybe the top mentor. I don't know, but learned a lot from
that
you.
Kern guy was pretty good. I mean, I listened to that one. I was like, shit, I got to follow that guy. He was pretty good.
But yeah, I think I'm so stoked that this is gonna be like come off as a humble brag for myself, but not. But like, because I can't believe you remembered it, Michael, which was I always used to refer to you as like the Tom Brady of client service and account strategy, because the analogy was just the game had slowed down from you. I was young in my career, and just, you were seeing the play unfold before, the snap of the ball, to keep the analogy going. And I think that's just a testament to, how good you are as a, marketing strategist, but also, that you can't be experience. You can't teach experience. And so I learned a lot from you, and working on, some of the coolest, biggest brands. I don't know. So Zoe, Michael was my mentor for a long time, and learned a lot from him. And we worked on a few different brands together. I'm sure we can tell some stories from the trenches. I saw you posted on LinkedIn the Cadaver lab.
It's funny because as I'm like branding myself now, I'm just applying. It's like what I do now. It's like, I just do what I do for brands for myself, and so I've been actively doing that. And so I'm thinking of like content strategies on LinkedIn and healthcare, because I'm planning to move out to the Charlotte, Raleigh area, and there's a ton of fintech and a ton of healthcare out there. So I said I'd bolster my old healthcare experience, reached out to some of those team members and stuff. And so I was like, what cool, engaging content can I find? And then I remembered we went and to a Cadaver lab and actually, watched the thing, and you were part of it. And so it was great that we reconnected again. And then this thing came up. I was like, well, sounds like the perfect time to repost that, because you were there that day and almost fainted, if I remember.
No way. I would never do that.
Wait, I need to know more context. Do tell. What was the activation?
So we used to work on a brand called Boston Scientific in the spinal cord stimulation product, which is this really cool product. Michael, I'm going to butcher it so long, and probably know it better. Why don't you tell it? You're the guest. How about you tell it? It's your story. You just posted on LinkedIn.
Sure. We were both there. So it was a spinal cord stimulator called Spectrum. Shit, I almost forgot it down too. Anyway, it's a little battery implant, right? Like Medtronic's got them and what have you. And then this one was like a revolutionary one. And so it was, we were in San Diego, and it's based up all the way up in Valencia. So it was like a good 4.5 hour drive just to get up there and meet with these people. Super fantastic team at Boston like that. Loved working for them. They loved working with us. We were there for like 10 years launching some of these med device products.
Valencia's
and one of the things,
claim to fame, by the way, is this is going to take a dark turn, but I remember it was around the time Paul Walker had crashed his car, and it was right near their headquarters. And that was like, I just remember going there, like, yep, and that's the tree.
Like it's like you make a right turn, that's there, and then left turn is the office, Boston Scientific. Anyway, so one of the things that they prided themselves on making, their partners, and certainly agencies like us do, is just get involved. So we would go to trade shows, we meet with the salespeople, we meet with patients, we meet with patient advisory boards. And one of the things was going to the Cadaver lab, which was on site, and watching an implant. And they show you how this thing gets put into, and there was this, I called it the canned ham because it's just a torso that somebody donated, right? I'm a donor. Somebody might do this on me one day. And then they show you how they make the incision and do the whole thing. And it's, it's in a cold room because it's, there's dead flesh in there. And it's myself and CJ and Cassandra. If you remember Cassandra, she's fantastic also. And we were just there watching this thing. And CJ might have got a little woozy. I mean, he's like a 6'8" person. So the hair is already thinner as it is. And then I think he just gotta.
I don't remember any of that. I do remember though, I mean, this is unrelated to, I don't remember woozy, but I remember them giving very clear instruction. If you feel woozy, you go to the wall and you put your back against the wall and then you slowly squat down. And that's the safest way to faint. I've actually remembered that lesson for my whole life. I have no problems with fainting though. So it's not like I've ever had to use before.
Yeah. Well, good. Never. Anyway, that's why we were there.
Hey, so catch us up. So that was so many like light years away. What happened after that with you?
Well, so I was at Vitro for a long time, 16 years. And the funny story with that one is, as a client services member and somebody who's been, pitching business and working on accounts and that kind of stuff, is you make relationships with all these clients. And so one of our former clients left to go do something else and then came back to Vitro to hire Vitro, as you should, because Vitro's a great agency. And then I became the account guy on it. And then so in a weird twist of fate, they were like, hey, we need somebody on our side to manage you. And I was in a period of my life where it was time for a change. And so I said, I think that's me. And they're like, nah, you're a Vitro lifer. I go, no, it's probably time to move on for all of us. And then so I hopped over to MoneyGram. And basically my job there was to start an internal agency. And what was great about that was, like, if anybody ever called me and said, hey, we want you to run an internal agency for a performance marketing team, MoneyGram, 80-year-old retail fintech out of Dallas, Texas, I would have said, no effing way. No effing way. Does that sound like fun? But the people that I was working with, the expectations of what the brand was going to be doing was very appealing. And so I went to MoneyGram. We hired Vitro, who did a great job for the first year and a half. Then MoneyGram was bought by a private equity firm, and then everybody from the top down got involved in everything. And then so eventually we ended up hiring a new agency, which was Cutwater, who actually also ended up being a really good agency for us. And then slowly but surely I started building an internal team. So then by the end, I had 12 people, none of us there anymore, who were basically running an internal creative team for the globe. 400,000 retail locations, 200 countries, tens of millions of dollars of media budget, and all of the assets and everything that would go along with it. So talk about a learning curve to go client side, but also very familiar, and just the ability to sort of focus all of, to your point, experience. You can't replace that into one brand. Actually felt pretty good. So I will say the hardest part for me was it's remote. They're in Dallas and I'm in San Diego. And so when you're used to collaborating with people in and out of an office all day, even post-COVID, it was pretty tough to sit. I'm in the global headquarters of what is now MCAT marketing. But at the time for MoneyGram marketing is my kitchen table, right? And so that was probably the toughest. Anyway, but it was a great experience, and that's kind of what I've been doing. And now I'm just looking for what's next.
Why did you find it so? Oh, sorry, CJ, go on.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, with just remote life and building culture, and you were talking about like building the internal team to begin with, I would just love to hear you speak about that and how you navigate those challenges.
Yeah. What helped me personally was, again, the connections I had made from a career standpoint, particularly on the creative side, to know once I got feet wet in terms of what MoneyGram was trying to do, that made it easy for me to go, oh, that's the kind of team I need to build. So there was an entrenched team there, and a lot of them were still part of the group who were, basically a big part of the design and production and that kind of thing. But in terms of like creative leaders, creative directors who can bring an agency caliber level of work to an in-house agency, reached out to the networks and that I had and found somebody who I had worked with at Vitro, who also was in San Diego. CJ, I don't know if you remember Ash Caballas. Was he there when you were there? Can't remember. Anyway,
I don't think so.
He's somebody I've known for over 20 years. I worked with at NYCA, and he was somebody who knew how to create a big brand idea, but also produce it in all of its different pieces and parts, which, as we know from a media plan standpoint, become exponentially more and more every single time you turn on a media plan. And so he was somebody I brought in. So to answer your question more directly, it was great because even though we were all sort of remote and using all the tools and everything you could do, Ash is in San Diego. And so Ash and I would have what we called office hours. And so we would get out boards and things on walls and do that process still, and then just translate it certainly digitally and then certainly remotely to the rest of the team and go from there. And then everybody else I worked with, which I also had an opportunity to do, is there were some folks on the team who had bigger aspirations than they originally were hired for. And for me, I always loved bringing up good talent, CJ being one of them, in a way where they go, oh, you don't want to just be this thing. You want to actually do that and maybe elevate to that. Let's give you a shot. And then so we actually had two creative directors. One was a writer who ended up actually helping run the studio that we had in-house. And unfortunately, she also got let go, but she was fantastic in a role that, frankly, I never would have thought she wanted until she raised a hand and said, can I get a shot at that? And so we elevated her too. Yeah. And then we were running a pretty tight team, and we were just going through the throes of meeting with AI automation companies. So like Seltras and Smartleys and Innovates and Adobe Firefly and all those folks to go, okay, now I actually need to turn 12 people into like 10,000 assets a month. How do we do that? And then that's where we stopped.
So CJ, remind me, you started as an account manager. What was your position?
Yeah, account supervisor. I don't know if I immediately reported to you, Michael, but I can't remember. I think, but no, Terry. Anyway, yeah, as an account supervisor. I do remember that title because when I got the job offer letter, I was entertaining a couple other offers, but they were for like account manager positions. And I had missed that the position that was offered to me was account supervisor. And I was like, oh, this one's better. It's like, and that's why I took the job. Cause at that point, all the salaries and everything were comparable. And, this one's a better title and all that.
This is a true full circle moment then, Michael. You must be so proud that CJ started with you and now he's running a company. Did you ever see that coming?
Yeah, of course I did. Because CJ, if I remember, you didn't come from a real traditional background either. And so, to see talent, and this may potentially come off of a humble brag, although I'll tell you why I remember your compliment as well. Because there's just a few people who you go, all right, beyond a job description, beyond a title, beyond a salary, beyond a client assignment, whatever, they just haven't, an it, to be cliched for a moment. And so CJ's definitely one of them. There's another person that worked for me who we did a lot of events for ASICs, and she hated it. And then one day she had a moment at an event that she went, oh my God, I really like this now. And then she went on to run her own event company with Steven Spielberg or whatever. And then now she's head of events at Netflix, right? And so it's one of those things where I go, I had a little help with that, and so to see CJ doing what he's doing, when we reconnected in Kensington, because we found out we were neighbors through social media, which is a funny thing to say, to be able to, hear what he's accomplished and is doing now is fantastic. Very proud, and well-deserved because he's awesome.
I still remember. Really cool. So Tom Sullivan was the CEO of Vitro at the time. And I don't know if he still is.
Still is. But, okay. Yeah. He and John still run that place. Yeah.
Yeah, good guy. And I remember I was sitting, I think it was he was sitting next to me on a couple of beanbag chairs, very agency cliche. And I was a young guy. I had no idea what I was doing or talking about. I was probably, and then I look back, I'm like, I was an idiot. I didn't know anything in hindsight.
Everybody thinks they're an idiot in hindsight.
Yeah. Back to Russell Kern, he would always say, we're all in the art of sales at all times, and sales is just passion meets conviction. So just say it with passion and say it without blinking, and people will follow.
Yep.
But anyway, I remember Tom asking me, do you think you would ever start your own agency one day? And I said, oh yeah, yep, definitely. And he goes, oh really? Just well, do you have a name picked out for it? I go, yep. He goes, what is it? And I look back at that. I still think about this. I go, I'm such an idiot. Don't tell the CEO of your agency that you're going to start. And I have no idea. We never talked about it ever again. But all I can think about in hindsight is he probably doesn't even remember that conversation. But he was probably like, oh, yeah, he's long. Let's not invest in that guy.
Well, I will say the one of the good things, many good things about Vicho is the roots and seeds, I guess, that they plant, that they actually then do take care of other people, right? Case in point, with this MoneyGram thing, it's like, as I was leaving, which didn't make a lot of people happy, but at the time I was like, I was happy to be on the other side of that fence working with this agency. And so whether you go freelance, whether you start your own companies, what have you, the understanding of building bridges, not burning them, and keeping those connections. A lot of former Vicho employees became clients, which is interesting. And so I think that's a good testament to that group. So yeah, so I don't think you told any trade secrets outside of, again, you just demonstrated how much passion you have to go beyond. Tom is an entrepreneur, and he is somebody who didn't even probably think at one point in time he'd own an ad agency, and then he did, and he is having a blast doing it. But he had to have that mindset first, right? Not necessarily the goal of an agency, but just the mindset of, I want to do something different. I don't want to be your employee forever. And that's actually pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. What you mentioned learning curve when you went client side. Can you unpack that? What is it like over there?
Yeah, for sure. It's funny because every fear we had on the agency side of how politics and internal dynamics of a client, 100% true, right? The layers, the decision making that you go, like, why did a client make that decision? And you go on the client side, you go, oh, now I know why, right? And it wasn't necessarily a bad decision or a poorly planned decision. You can just see like all the different reds and layers of a product team or an IT team or a procurement team or a sourcing team. All of those things that we used to always say on the agency side is like, okay, we get the marketing team. And the marketing team then also has to manage an internal team of their own. And then they have to manage us as an agency. And we might even be one of multiple agencies they're managing. So like really our universe, which is the most important universe, is really a very small part of a client's universe. And that became very clear being on the other side. So even though I was managing a Vicho and a Cutwater doing world-class work, it was 10% of my job in terms of internal support, HR support, resourcing and sourcing and pitching budgets and all these other kind of things. And then what seemed like willy-nilly decisions on the agency side, on the client side, were very clear. It's like, oh, that's why we're canceling this project you've been working on for 6 months. You're pissed. You did a lot of creative work. You burned a lot of hours. Oh, it's because compliance killed it, or because a partner dropped out, right? Your things that you just don't know, that actually happens on the client side. So that learning curve, I guess, helped me be a bit more patient and understanding of that universe, but then also to help understand, okay, if you've got an idea and you want to get it done, you got to move quicker. And you actually, got to almost fly under radar, because as soon as you pop head above sand, a lot more people actually have to be involved.
You've kind of already answered my question with just moving quicker, but now you've worked on both sides and you've seen the internals of like agency side and client side. What would you do differently as an agency, knowing just internally how clients work?
That's a great question. I think it is in the speed standpoint. I remember being on the agency side, there was like, okay, we're doing the scope work, and we're at scope creep because we're on 4th or 5th round of something and it's taking more time. And so there's always sort of, and then everybody's working on something else, right? Agency model is you're probably not dedicated to one account. Therefore, you get burned out real quick. Or you just end up doing kind of what you're being asked. And I would say what is missing on the client side is agency partnership, proactivity, ideas from anywhere, because you tend to know the business even more so. And so I would say, if there was things I would want to do differently on an agency side is to almost have kind of like we talked about with like a content plan now, right? Is like an idea plan. Every month, somebody, maybe even people who don't even work on the business, are just bringing fresh ideas all the time. And 99 out of those 100 aren't going to get done, but it stays top of mind. It says you understand the business. It reinforces the partnership is beyond a scope kind of thing. But I would say those things that on the agency side you felt weren't important, on the client side actually are important. Even if a client's telling you don't do it, I would say from my perspective, although I'm skewed because I'm an agency guy, that those are things that are important.
That's really good to hear, because I feel like, CJ, that reminds me of something very similar to what you've said previously. Is like one of the number one reasons agency get fired is because of lack of innovation. So it's always coming with like fresh ideas and new perspectives. Like Michael, even you said that even if you don't execute on 60% of them, just coming with fresh ideas constantly just helps with that innovation on the client side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because even if the ideas don't get done, they demonstrate knowledge of the space, knowledge of why you got hired as an agency, which is to bring outside perspectives, right? Because it's very easy, particularly in regulatory industries, education, finance, healthcare, to stay right here because it's only going to get approved by legal if we do blank. But sometimes you got to think about something outside the box. What was great at MoneyGram was the avenue for that was they were an F1 sponsor. And so that sort of created this like build a lifestyle brand outside of the fintech brand to some extent that actually allowed a little bit more of those kind of more innovative ideas that we were able to do.
Imagine healthcare being a very interesting industry to navigate with creative, because like you said, it's like you can only do X and stay within these boundaries, otherwise it won't get improved by a legal team. It's like, how do you balance like the creativity with like actually just these constraints? We can't do this.
Well, I mean, I'll say it, and actually Kern on your S1 brought this up too. I think CJ, you brought it up as well, is the agency relationship with the client. Is the client willing to do something? Because again, part of that learning curve on the client side is you can push legal. Legal isn't a black and white thing. Legal is how much risk do you want to take on thing? How much do we want to potentially get sued or fight for or create precedent, kind of thing. And so I would say the ideas coming from an agency to a more open-minded client will allow more of those ideas to get done, because then the client will take ownership of it and also then go fight for it internally to help some of that more legal regulatory approvals. And then, but they all, no matter what, still have to be on brief, patient relevant, in this situation, consumer relevant, patient relevant, product, feature benefit, value sort of thing. Like all of those building blocks should still be part of it. It's not like you can go, oh, healthcare brand, let's go throw people out of an airplane. If it's still a relevant idea, that at least has the foundation, and then it's a really cool idea that you would get a client to go fight for it. That's how you get those ideas done.
I think to build on it too, this is where the brief becomes even more critical. So like if you're going to be, you got to tell or prep people mentally that how creative or how much you push before you push it, because it's the surprises that make people uncomfortable. And if you say, hey, we're going to work on the brief together, let's get really comfortable with what we're setting as like our aim, and hey, we're going to really push this one. Do we all agree? You guys, hey, client or brand, you're going to have to probably battle with legal. We just know it. We'll do our best to stay within the guardrails, but we're going to probably make legal a little uncomfortable, and then you guys will likely have to assume some risk. But are we all good with that before we start? I think where you get into like a tailspin is when you go, ta-da, and it's like some batshit idea that would never get approved by legal, and then the client's like, I don't want to put my neck out on the line, because it's at the end of the day, everybody's just trying to kind of look out for themselves. They could be the nicest person ever, but if it's between me and my agency, I'm protecting myself. And so, I think it's just getting aligned with the brief when you're going to take risks.
Yeah. And to break the rule of two add-ons, the behavior of a brand is it opens up a lot of opportunity, I think. Meaning for Boston Scientific, let's just use Boston Scientific, for example, since we talked about it. It is a very, very, very specific product that you can make some claims, but no claims about, right? And so if you're talking about like advertising Spectra Wave Rider, you can only say so many things. But the brand at its brand house has innovation in its pillars. Okay, well, how do we actually demonstrate Boston Scientific as an innovative brand? Sometimes those ideas then go, okay, I'm not even going to talk about the product. I'm going to talk about what they do to innovate, or how that product was born from cochlear implant technology, and all these other kind of things. So case in point, that brand, because they were really great to work with, we were, as the agency V show, they actually had Tom Sullivan come present to their whole company, the Neuromod company, about innovation. And then a lot of the work we ended up doing actually won one of those clients an innovator award. And so again, you think about some of the things you do outside of just the product to actually, get a patient. The brand did other things and was open-minded to being more innovative, right? So,
Now I'm curious on the topic of just creative risks. Is there anything in your career that you've done, like an example that either paid off really well or in hindsight didn't actually pay off that well as a bit of a creative risk, but you're like, oh, it's still worth it for X, Y, Z?
that's a good one. Creative risk. I'll say, I'll equate risk with stress, right? The most stress I've ever had working on a brand was working on ASICs when we did activations for the New York City Marathon. And so it's very easy to go, okay, how do you activate a marathon? Oh, put a booth in the Javits Center and get people to walk by and do stuff. But we had a great team that said, okay, we're fifth in market share and Nike's dominating. We're a sponsor of that race. ASICS is a sponsor of that race. Nike's not, but Nike looks like they are, right? Lance Armstrong is running. This is all doing all these kind of things. So when our team then ideated, and actually the media team actually ideated a lot of our activation opportunities, they became super risky and therefore super stressful because they may not pull off. Like we were doing things that had literally never been done before with technology that we were creating. Support Your Marathon, it was RFID chips in your bib to track where you are on a course, but then actually have that queue up a screen on the track that has a pre-recorded video from a loved one telling you, hey, great job as you cross that line, doing that kind of technology, putting people on a treadmill running 12.5 miles an hour. I don't know how long you think you can do that. But Brian Hall could do it for 2 hours and win marathons. I did it for 52 seconds.
I know Zoe is
different...
a D1 runner, so she might be able to do it.
There
we go. Right?
I actually saw on your LinkedIn that you did that with the marathon and the treadmill. It's definitely sparked my interest.
And so so doing those kind of things where the risk reward factor, I mean, they're certainly some of the most things I'm proud of, certainly most award winning and successful in terms of my career and working with those brands. But that would probably be the more risk where even a client is like, you're going to do what? You're going to take how much money and you're going to get 3 people to do this thing? How is that going to reach what I need to sell shoes? Well, hold on. This is how, then you have to build the whole platform around an activation that might only have a few people participate, but then news media shows up, then all of this other kind of, oh man, I froze on the funniest looking thing. There we go. And then news media shows up and now all of a sudden you have amplification of a big idea. And then, that's where I think some of those risks. And so it becomes down to doing your homework, having good connections and network. And then again, a client that was open, which the ASICS client was definitely open-minded, doing some cool things, and they were rewarded for it.
How do you go from kind of like an off the cuff crazy idea to actually doing it? So I find that a lot of ideas are sparked in just, conversation, a meeting, a status call, and everybody kind of chuckles and just says oh, that'd be cool. And then nothing happens, but those are often the best ideas. And then they just never get executed. Does that happen? And how do you stop that from happening?
Yeah. I'll tell you right now, the most valuable, the MVPs, I would probably say, if I'm going to tout all the cool things I got to do in this business, the MVPs are the producers, event producers, broadcast producers. They're almost fixers from use that term, because they're so connected and they're so open. The right ones are so open to go, I have no idea how we're going to get that one done. Give me 48 hours. And they call you back and they go, I found this guy who's doing this and da-da-da-da-da. I mean, we built, Trojan horses as gyms and went to a group that builds fabrications for theme parks. And they go, oh, you know how to make fake things look real. I can make your Trojan horse look like a giant wooden Trojan horse. When we were doing all of these treadmills and all of the other kind of things, you name it. It was great to work with producers who, again, just had that attitude of, yeah, let me go figure it out. I'll get back to you. And again, sometimes they don't, or they don't come in the budget, or they come with insurance risks. Again, some of those things you don't think about, those things are what kills it. It's oh, I can't do that. And the client's not going to put up the money, so we're not going to do it. But more often than not, it was because of a producer who just figured out how to get it done.
Yeah. It makes me think of a story of we both used to work with this woman, Joan, who was production producer. She was incredible. And I still remember we had this crazy idea. There was a campaign for a telecom company, and we had this idea of like big, small is big or big is small. It's like the biggest, smallest place on earth was kind of the idea. And so we had this concept where we wanted to create double-decker buses out of Mini Coopers, and nobody had any clue how to do that. But Joan, you gave her, I think it was 2 days, and she didn't have one. She had 2 quotes on fabricating, making these little double-decker buses to drive around Anchorage, Alaska, and like pick people up and give them free rides. Ultimately, that activation never happened, but that was a fun one. And I think I actually, as I think about it, I'm kind of like answering my own question. It's like, one, it's, to prevent those ideas from just dying in a meeting with a chuckle, somebody just got to go behind the scenes and like bring it along and bring it to a point where somebody can actually say yes to it. Where it's like, hey, we actually talked to the producer. We got a rough estimate. We got a rough timeline. Slide the proverbial paper across the table and say, all you need to do is sign, and we make it happen.
I'll say, and that's usually like a chicken egg cart horse conversation you always have is, I'm a believer you want to sell the idea first. As soon as you sell the idea, then things like budgets and what have you typically tend to have some more elasticity to them, right? If you bring look, I'm going to pitch you this idea and it's going to cost $100,000 and look like this, you actually might end up selling yourself short because you've committed to fitting in a budget. And then therefore the idea can only be as big as the budget versus as big as it could and should be, kind of thing. But I also agree, that's also understanding your client. If your client's super risk averse, super budget conscious, you can't sell any idea unless you have some of that paperwork to kind of go, we've called a couple people, we think we can get it done. It's definitely going to be within your budget, but what have you. And then usually the enemy of that is also then the craft and perfection that, a high standard, high quality agency, particularly like with Beach is, even if you could get it done for $100,000, is it going to look like the way you want it? Is it going to actually turn out? Are you going to make so many concessions and corner cuts, to actually not execute the idea you want? So, and a super quick example of that one is we're working with Petco, and they had a classic, I need a holiday idea. Okay, I need to increase sales for online and in store, super crowded space, don't have necessarily a big budget. And it's about retail sales. And so it was expectations were banner ads, sales, some sort of charity donation, 1-for-1 kind of thing. And then our team went, you're missing an opportunity. Your pets and it's holiday, right? And so that budget, let's call it, was $200,000-$300,000 of production. Creative team came back with a crusher of an idea that was immediately bought. And then we came back and said, it's going to cost us $600,000 to make it, but we're going to use this animation company. We're going to use this, and we're going to build the network out with these assets like that. And they went, stall. And then that one again, kicked butt in terms of its results, but also then won strategy awards and all these things because it was a big idea and brief that didn't get constrained by a budget. And then they found the money to go do it, and they were rewarded by it.
Which campaign or activation was that?
That was the Petco holiday campaign, which I can't remember the name of the actual campaign, but that's going to be one of my next LinkedIn posts for sure, because it's one of my favorite campaigns we've done. The idea was a kid wanted a bicycle for Christmas, but he didn't have any money. And so he went to go shovel snow to earn money for this bike, right? Well, then of course, the parents end up buying the bike for Christmas anyway. They just wanted to see him work hard for this thing. And so instead the kid goes, I'm going to take all this money. And during his work, he sees this dog in a pet store window, which is probably controversial anyway, that only had 3 legs. And so it was kind of getting forgotten during the Christmas time. So he bought this 3-legged dog. And then so when he comes home with this 3-legged dog, it can't quite play fetch and run as fast as the kid is hoping to. So he gets this idea, totally dismantles his bike and builds a wheel for the 3rd leg so the dog can actually play fetch faster. And it's all done in like Rankin and Bass animation style. We use this group called House Special out of Portland, who are like derivatives of the group that did like Coraline and all those kind of movies, right? And talk about a fascinating experience that was both painful and awesome at the same time, because when you're dealing with that kind of stuff, but like literally puppets and stop motion animation. There's no reshoot, right? Because you're like click, 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 click. Your storyboard's got to be exact, all the different things, and then all the CG that went after it. And, it was a 60-second mini movie with a custom music that was done by Singing Serpent. And it's definitely the number one crown jewel of what the stuff I've done, for sure. It's so beautiful. Makes you cry.
I think that back to, when what you said, like is it going to be enough to do it at the quality that you want or expect? Yeah. We deal with that a ton because we're dealing with much smaller brands, scale ups that don't have very finite budget. So one thing that we've actually leaned into is if you can't get it done to the level that, let's say you need it to be cinema quality. Well, you don't have that budget. We'll actually push purposely the other way. So because we found that if you try to pull it off to a level of craft that you can't actually pull off, it comes off bad and cheesy and like you're trying too hard. But if you purposely push it to be lo-fi, then you can actually pierce through the noise in advertising today. And, obviously just the overwhelming IGC or influencer generate content that we're seeing and all that, like, proves that. But that would be my pro tip, is like push the other way and don't try too hard because you'll just make yourself look dumb or just janky.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's sound advice. I mean, it's the landscape for content is so much more forgiving. And I think consumers are pretty savvy, right? It's like, as much as consumers are like, yep, I'll scroll through influencer content, and influencer content continues to by far outperform any other ad that you can make. But when you
kills us as a creative agency.
I know, trust me. But when you make film that has story, right? To your point, and that's still some of the most loved stuff, right? Like, people still watch Super Bowl spots. People still want to watch more of those like anthemic kind of stories being told. But I totally agree. I love your perspective that if you can't go all the way, as long as the idea is sound, how do you still deliver it in a way that at least comes across and like, okay, the core idea is there. We're just going to execute it this way and not try too hard. There's another phrase John Vicho used to say this. I assume it's his quote. Don't chase hope, right? Because if you think about like agency hour burn, budget burn, time burn, frustration and patience burn, they come from, to do a classic callback, the inches, not feet, right? So I think even moving feet is also decision-making, not necessarily how do you progress the idea, but how do you then go, okay, I'm going to kill the idea and pivot, right? Or I'm just going to kill the idea and start over again. The sooner you do that, the better, versus this chasing hope inches kind of thing, because then you're just not getting anywhere. And now people are frustrated, you're running out of time, you're burning time. So I like your thought there.
What frameworks?
It was in Alaska, by the way, Zoe, that this quote was. So another callback to talking about when we worked on Alaska communications together, literally sitting in a bar in Anchorage, and we went local, like where we got like looked at because people knew we weren't from
we were
Anchorage,
some city slickers.
Yeah. And I remember it was the corner of that bar. And trust me, I don't actually have a good memory, but I remember that compliment you gave me, which is great. And it's actually I'm building my website for the first time. And so I have a testimonial section. Your quote's for sure going to be in there because it's one of my like top 4 like best compliments I've ever received. So thank you. But yeah, it happened in Alaska, a little bar in Alaska.
Yeah. I still remember the bar where you would scrape the cheese off the wheel of cheese right on the bar. And I was like, that is so not COVID approved. Oh man,
Michael, a lot of the activations you were speaking about before is like, they sound like they're coming from brands and companies that obviously have like a lot of disposable income to be able to pull off kind of big, grand, on a larger scale activations. Like DJ mentioned, we work with a lot of brands that are like smaller scale ups. They don't have the money essentially to do these like big in-person experiences. It's like, how do you strike the balance between, navigating those conversations with clients between brand building versus like performance marketing? Because a lot of these ideas clients are hesitant to do them because it's like, okay, well, what's the return on investment? Like, what are we getting out of this? And I think it's a conversation that comes up time and time again. It's like, is the juice worth the squeeze essentially, versus like on digital advertising, you can very clearly see metrics and performance. And I think that's just a challenge that we see a lot with clients, and just, again, interested to hear your perspective on it.
Yeah. I think you have to look at it, and it's, it's a constant one of the things I'll say to go back to another question and then answer this question is on the client side that I recognized a lot is fragmentation, meaning or siloed opportunity, right? And so even the way you're talking about it, Zoe, it's like, oh, here's a digital performance media plan. Here's an activation plan. Here's a brand plan. They're all one plan. Right? They all should be considered one plan. And so when you think about an activation, like we do for New York City Marathon, did for New York City Marathon for ASICs, like that was one element, and remember I had to build the spider chart of things to show like how it all is connected. But all of the content you were creating served someone else's purpose. So it's not like I had a banner ad campaign that has its own media production budget, an activation plan that has its own. It was, and we used the phrase where it was like production dollars become media dollars. If we can actually have a level of PR support, news support, and it's because it's been a while, social media support, influencers on site, et cetera, who are actually helping amplify those ideas, you don't even look at it as separate budgets. You look at it as one thing. And so I think for clients that might have small budgets, the risk is that, okay, I'm going to take what feels like a traditional production budget, turning on a camera, AI, whatever it ends up being, but I'm actually going to go do an event instead. But guess what? Everyone's filming that event. I got influencers at that event. I've got database building participation at that. Like all of the different tools are actually built into that event. And then later, either that event itself or the results of that event become your other mid-low funnel campaign, because now you've got something else to put into the algorithm that says, oh, beyond just talking about product features and benefit, look what this brand actually did. Now I want to learn more.
I always think about that graphic that we showed to death is the paid, owned, earned ecosystem, and just how it's all interconnected. And, there's attention going from one circle to the next and all that. And then what I learned with working with you, Michael, was just like, let's start with the idea first, which you already mentioned. What's the big idea?
Mm-hmm.
And then I think we used to say like, just that's the ham, right? And we're going to carve up the ham. So if it's a stunt or an activation or a treadmill in the middle of Manhattan or whatever, it's like, let's start with something remarkable. You have to start with something that's like worthy of remarking on, and then figure out how you either slice it to accomplish those goals or bolt onto it with like bringing the influencers into the fold and just like having them there. So like a strategic challenge could be, all right, well, we need to amplify this with, not a ton of media budget. Let's get the influencers there. How are we going to do that? I don't know. Let's answer, why does it make sense to have an influencer there and like bolt onto it?
Well,
Let's
and that's
start
where
with the cool idea.
the channel owners, like, again, need to be on board. So the way we did that at MoneyGram with an internal agency is I still call all the other people outside of my group my clients. It was just the way we had to do it. So once we had an idea based off of either a media brief or a product brief or whatever it is, then I went to the channel owners and briefed them and said, here's our idea. So like the agency bringing it to the client. And then so like we had a Mother's Day campaign. Mother's Day is the second largest send season for remittance across the globe. And so we have to win Mother's Day no matter what. So once we got to a core idea, and this one, it was when mothers used to call you home, right? When you were a kid, street lights came on, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You went home, but when they're half a world away, how do you sort of come home and your mother calls you, right? And this is, you said, money during Mother's Day. Once we had that core idea and we built a campaign around it, then you go to the influencer campaign. And so then the influencer group, influencer channel, they all went to their influencer group and said, tell me what your mom called you as a nickname and how you got called home, or what would you do if your mom called you home today? We went to the Haas F1 team. We went to the FC Dallas team. The FC Dallas team ran our spot during a Mother's Day event where they were actually having a match on Mother's Day. And they actually played the spot in arena and had everybody call home, right? Kind of thing. And so now all of a sudden the channel owners are briefed with the idea, and it's up to them to go, how is it best for my silo to then integrate with that silo, right? Or integrate with that idea. And then that's how it becomes surround sound.
I think you just nailed that. Is the biggest difference that I've seen from the big brands that I used to work on to, and I take that back. It's just one of the biggest missed opportunities where you come up with a great idea, whether it's internal or the agency comes up with it, but a lack of follow through. And it's like, cool, we have this campaign and we made a TV spot or we made a handful of social ads, and then they go and they run and then they just fade.
and it's like the brand never takes that messaging or that idea into, you know, their sales sheets or into their organic social media or onto their YouTube channel or into their sales pitches or presentations. They just never follow through and actually support the idea. And oh man, that's the master brief technique of going to every one of the groups is just needs to happen. And you have to just be like, I don't know how you're going to do it, PR team, but here's our idea. Like, and challenge them.
Right. And then challenge them and give everybody ownership of it, you know? And so, you know, I think there's a fear now based off of how fragmented media channels are, that the old idea of match luggage is dead, right? When I say match luggage, I mean, you just take a visual and a headline and you resize it for your newspaper, your TV, your radio, like those don't exist anymore. Everything has to have such a finite amount of relevancy and specificity per channel and per deliverer of that channel. But as long as the core idea is right, you can do exactly what you're talking about. And also make it someone else's responsibility. So again, in any retail environment, if you're selling something, marketing's not 100% of that job. Sales, retail, the product itself, some sort of pricing strategy, right? We're not even just talking about marketing channels need to be aligned. Like the whole company needs to be aligned to go, oh, I'm going to win Mother's Day, or I'm going to win this marathon activation, or I'm going to win the holiday season, retail season. Everybody needs to get involved. So it feels like one big idea, because then that's how a consumer then through all of these channels and all the myriad ways they see this content feel like it's one idea over and over again, but not get burned out with the same visual, the same headline 10,000 times.
And it seems counterintuitive, but I think there's actually economy of scale there. You actually get more return on your investment and effort by batch thinking and executing. And it doesn't seem like that, but it is, because it's like, oh, now everybody's aligned under the same idea. So not every group doesn't need to come up with their own idea. Just execute to this one.
So think about it from a production standpoint too, right? So you asked earlier about, you know, how do you manage all these budgets? Well, it's like, if you have the idea ahead of content capture, you know, going into content capture, what channels need to be supported with that content, right? And so we actually at MoneyGram worked with a group called Yada Yada, and which is a fantastic name for a production company, but their whole shtick is big agencies will go spend $1 million capturing one TV spot. But while you're there, hire us and we'll get all your B-roll, all your behind the scenes, all your digital, all your social, all your library stuff, because all of the heavy lifting of production value was done by the big agency, and we can come in, surgical strike, and capture all the stuff we actually know you're going to use for 10,000 assets.
Genius.
And so, right. And they're called Yada Yada because it's like, oh, I need all that other stuff. Yeah. Yada Yada, you know, and so it's just a great name. Anyway, look, Maddie Clark, she's fantastic. Anyway, so when you think about production efficiencies, right? Just having that mindset going, I'm going into a $500,000 shoot, but I know I'm going to need all of these things because the influencer team told me what they need. So I'm going to hire influencers. They're going to come to the shoot so I can capture it all the same. Like all of those things happen when you actually get ahead of that versus, oh, now I need to go spend exponential budget because it was done after the fact. And so you actually will create efficiencies. Your brand will look more consistent, and it'll be one big idea versus a bunch of small ideas.
On the smaller scale in our world, we always recommend, if you're shooting a video, hire a separate photographer. If you're shooting stills, hire a separate videographer. Don't fall for the trap of like, oh, we can just pull 4K frame grabs from the video. I've never seen it work out ever.
Never works.
But every videographer will tell you that's what they'll do. And just, you know, pay the extra couple grand to have somebody there just spraying down with photos.
And then have the foresight too to do, you know, because everybody always says, okay, what's your live area? Well, if you use the lowest common denominator, you're not going to get great content, meaning like using the space. So vertical videos, obviously huge, horizontal for YouTube and CTV, et cetera, and then certainly square for everything else. And so if you go in, like at MoneyGram, we work with Kabi LeMay, you know, the big influencer guy. He's synonymous with the word easy and simple. And so that certainly aligns with our brand and our products. And so we went into a shoot, we had like 2 hours. And so we comped up what he would do in vertical. So we had him standing against a wall. We needed something horizontal. So we had him laying on a couch, you know, like we actually have those things built out so that way you can move quickly through a shoot, even if it's the B or C sort of team working on it. because typically you don't have a lot of time and you need to get a lot of assets. And so there is a little bit more than, yes, I can just take the 4K, still image, but also have the foresight to go, okay, how is this thing going to look in vertical? How's it going to look in horizontal? Almost like pre-building some of the ads and layouts conceptually as well.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I always think with like shot lists, we always aim for, you want not a spare minute or second in that day. And if the team gets through your entire shot list, you've done it wrong. You need to, and then we'll rank them like must haves, B shot, C shot, D shot, and just cut the D's if you don't,
Right.
if you don't need it. But nobody should be standing around for a second. I mean, I learned that from
No.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah. What else? What other frameworks have you been using? I know you when I think of you, I think of you like the king of frameworks, whether it's the matrix, like the grid, or the paid, owned, earned. Anything come to mind that you've just pulled out
it's funny.
sheet?
It's funny. Like I said, I'm working on personal branding, which it's always weird to do it on your own. I remember even trying to do it for agencies I worked at, and then we do it for other people. We don't do it for ourselves. And this idea of like a connector and synthesizer keeps popping up through like assessment tests and ChatGPT Q&As and stuff like that. And so it's great that you brought that up, because, it's hard to kind of go like, oh, what am I good at, or what am I known for? And I think it's exactly that. It's taking all these pieces and putting them together. And so to me, it's interesting too. I did a post on LinkedIn to talk about all the hats I wore, and then I went to a career coach and like, don't talk about being a jack of all trades. I was like, yeah, that's exactly what I am. I know a little about a lot of things, kind of that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But
I'm like T-shaped, really small downspout on the T.
Yeah. It's more like a seesaw.
I'm M-dash
shaped. Yeah. But when you think about understanding how all those pieces then work together to understand multiple channels, multiple client industries, compliance, regulatory versus sort of lifestyle, those are the things that I'm personally working on now, that I think, from more fragmented client side, more expectations from every channel with reduced budgets, and certainly this expectation of AI is going to solve all problems. Linking all of those things actually becomes a skill set that probably not a lot of people can do without X amount of years of experience or some level of, super intelligence. So yeah, that's the stuff that I think is the most important, particularly as companies think about either hiring people or working with agencies, is who's the connector? Who's the one who can take a step back and look at the beautiful mind wall and go, that's how it all kind of works. Because like I said, it's happened on agencies infrequently, but certainly on clients a lot. It's just siloed and fragmentation thinking. It's like you're going to get the least efficiencies, the less cool ideas if everybody sort of feels like they're owning their own thing versus kind of coming together. Another post I want to make too is this idea of no egos, right? And so there's so much fear and ownership and, what about me sort of thinking that I've noticed a lot in general, as everybody's sort of fearful of jobs and fearful of AI and fearful of political climates and stuff like that. But the more you break down those things and the more you just collaborate and everybody owns an idea and everybody gets to take credit for the idea and everybody gets to plus the idea. I look back as I'm building my portfolio and stuff like that, all those big, great ideas were because that was the team that was working on it. Was no ego, no a-holes, collaborative, open, we're all going to share in the success kind of thing. And that's definitely a mentality that needs to continue.
Yeah. You got to leave the ego at the door for sure. And I think, again, maybe stolen from you, which the name of this podcast was stolen from you, but back to a great execution at the end of it, you can't put a finger on who did what. It's just, you have no idea who did it, and some of the greatest headlines are written by art directors, and some of the greatest ideas for the art come from a copywriter's brain, or vice versa.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, because you mentioned I got a little credit for the bad idea for Clarity. I was, as an account person, I could have easily been waiting for the creative idea to come, right? But it wasn't the environment I was in, and it was a mentality I had. And I even found more creative sort of passion and joy even later in my career, because I got to work with more no ego, no a-hole creatives, where an idea could spark something, even if it wasn't your exact headline. And so if there was anything I always try to teach the client services teams I work with, was you got an idea, bring it. Don't say you're not creative because you weren't going to create it. Bring it. Bring an idea And if anything, it actually teaches you the thick skin creators have to have, right? Because, we would say like, oh, 9 out of 10 don't get bought. Well, 99 out of 100 don't get bought. 99,000 out of 100,000 don't get bought on the creative side, right? And so they're just getting, no's left and right until that one idea comes through. So don't be shy to bring an idea. Don't be shy to help sort of spark an idea. And I think the bad idea for Clarity is a great example of a mindset, not necessarily a role, that just says, bring the ideas. You hear social influencers and content creators all the time go, don't over perfect it. Don't over edit it. Just post it. Just post it. Move on to the next one, and something will strike or not, but just do it, because if you overthink it, you're going to make no progress.
Totally.
Go ahead, Zoe.
I was going to say, I just really love the idea of like, and it sounds like a lot of our core company values are coming from you, but it's like something that works so well in our team. It's just like, I know we talked a lot about like virtual versus in person, but just getting everybody on a call and almost having like what you would in terms of like a wall with sticky notes, but like a mind map, and having your account managers, your like copywriters, your designers. And it's just like a room where you're just throwing ideas on the wall. And I think what we found by the end of that, you are just using terminology such as we rather than like my idea, because at the end of those brainstorming calls, you just constantly kept like punching up someone's idea or building on it, so you walk away being like, actually that was collective, like that was all of our ideas together. So yeah, just a strong component of just like we instead of I, and getting the whole team involved just to generate ideas is so important.
And from my seat too, just as kind of like team captain of the agency, I've had some, we have a lot of great people here, and we've had some new people join who are amazing. And I've had to pull them aside and just say, hey, look, you're killing it. You're bringing so many great ideas to the brainstorm. You're doing all of this. And then, I hate this, but it's like, as CEO, like, I don't want to hear in a brainstorm meeting. By the time it reaches me, I want all the ideas to be we. So I would, I told this person, and if they ever listen to this, they'll know it's them, but it's like, so I need you to meet with your team before you meet with me. And I need you to get like either make your idea contagious and have them build on it, or give them an opportunity to contribute to it. So by the time it comes to the CEO, or by the time it makes it to the client, it truly is a we idea and not a me. And I go, and between, I'm like, you're outshining everybody. Don't do that. Like, make them part of the process.
Right. Well, there's a couple of things to unpack there. One is there's still roles, right? Even though everybody's creative, everybody has ideas, at the end of the day, it should be the agency pitching to a client. And then the roles come into play. So me as an account person, it was like, I'm bringing you an idea, but not necessarily because I want you to buy my idea. It'd be great if you did, but because I want you to know what I think the client would buy or what I know I can sell, right? Kind of a thing. And so a lot of it becomes, it's like creative versus account, but it's like, no. The account has the role of understanding client dynamics and then knowing what will get bought, not to say buy the things that the client, like there's a great quote, I think another John Vitro quote that says, client approved is not automatically good, right? Getting approved is not good necessarily all the time, right? And so to understand the roles. And so when you're talking about, I don't know what role that person is that you're talking about, but as they bring their ideas, the we also becomes but we're also on the hook to pitch it. And we also have ownership of it, right? Ownership of getting it done, ownership of feeling confident in it, right? And making it work. So it's not just the ownership of the idea as much as the whole program. And then then the client also has to own it, right? And so if you've got a junior or mid-level client you're probably pitching to first, they should be in the room pitching to their bosses. We think this is a good idea. Not necessarily, that agency brought me something. I was half and half on it as it is, but everybody should be up the ladder feeling the we, which I agree.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good point. I mean, and advice too, if you're on client side or on agency side, of like making sure that everybody has, a piece of the story or contributing. And for us, it actually varies by client and their culture, right? So we have one client who has a stellar internal creative team, and we're really there to collaborate and be an extension of their team or just amplify the awesome stuff that they're doing. And we tried a couple times coming to them and just saying with a really fully baked idea and multiples of them and going, ta-da, we got it figured out. And it actually backfired big time because they didn't have any input to it. So they were like, this is really cool, golf clap for your effort, but our fingerprints aren't on it. So now with them, we make a conscious effort. We bring them stuff intentionally quite half-baked, because if we go any further than that, they're not in. They haven't contributed. Other clients, on the other hand, have no time for us. You said 10% of your day is interacting with agencies. There may be like 1%. So, and other clients are very literal, and they need something that they can just put their rubber stamp on and move on to the next thing. And so, you just have to, and I think if a client is listening to this, somebody on the brand side, I think talking about that, communicating that expectation with your agency would be a really smart thing to do. And I always say the problems in our business or in business in general always can be traced back to either a lack of or poor communication. And every time, I can't think of an instance where it's not.
Yeah.
So
expectation management is huge. And so, to me, my absolute favorite part of working on agency side that I definitely missed working on client side was every hour felt like a different job. If you were talking to a different client, you were talking to a different team, you were talking internal, you were talking external, you were learning about new business. And so if I'm not diagnosed ADD, but I certainly feel the feels of it. The ability to go, to sort of ping pong your day actually was exciting to me and invigorating to me and an extrovert, all that kind of stuff. And so if you think about, one client likes it this way and another client likes it that way, again, that's the role of that account person to go, hey, team around us, this is how I think we should build this pitch or build this idea, because that's how that team's actually going to work. And that is absolutely born from your new business onboarding, new client onboarding, management of expectations, and again, all the other stuff I talked about on the client side, the politics, what does it take for you, client, to get something done? And if a client has a motivation, which a lot of clients do, how do I make you look good? Because when renewals come around, you're the first line of defense to go, I need to keep that group, right? And so again, that really comes from that account team. But again, it becomes a we, because account team is only as good as the creative team, the media team, and everybody else around them. So.
Yeah. Want to be respectful of your time. This is a crazy big question.
All day.
All right, cool.
Let's
keep this going.
Let's go for the
record.
You keep seeing me go like this. It's
I think the longest one we've done here is like an hour 20. So we're flirting with the new record.
Well, I assume you clip this down to only the good stuff. So.
I just publish. back to it's just press publish. I'm gonna get a hat that just says publish.
Just post.
So the spirit of the podcast is for us to try to answer this question of how do brands go from a few $1 million in revenues? They're past the startup phase, they're past the out of my garage phase, to $100 million. And I know none of us can have the answer. That's why this podcast, go talk to 1 million people about it. When I ask that question, what comes to your mind from your experience? What comes to your mind?
Yeah. Patience is probably one of them, right? Like the world, any industry, anything you do or watch, patience is running out, right? Everything's shorter attention span. Dude, I do some music production. Aaron, I was watching this music producer, and he was talking about the age of 90-second songs is coming. Like 90, how do you emotionally attach to a song that's only 90 seconds? It's crazy, right? If you think about 6-second videos and all that stuff. Anyway, patience would be the one where you put a plan together. The first step of any plan is to expect that plan to fail, but put a plan together. And, a phrase we use a lot with ASICS, because they were big underdogs to Nikes and Adidas, is win where you can win, right? And so I think before you scale, before you worry about big budgets per se, is find places you can win, and then sort of prove that out and scale for there. Find your unique proposition, find your audience, and build small from there, and then amplify. So I think a lot of people want to cast wide nets, and they want CACs and cost per acquisitions and everything at its most efficient. And I think sort of learning a blended CAC model is important. So you're going to spend, let's call it $400 at the top, but you're going to spend $10 at the bottom, and somewhere in the middle is probably your 50 to 100 you're trying to achieve, right? And so having an understanding of what that looks like over time. I mean, CJ, when we were working on Boston, we had negative if I remember, ROI on the first few months of that. It was like a paid social media plan, very targeted to people who need a $60,000 implant. By the end of, let's call it the first year, and certainly by the end of the first 2 years, we're at 1900% ROI, right? And so, but that was born from audience identification, USP, small budget, build audience, rinse, repeat, learn, et cetera, et cetera. So that would be my probably one word answer to that is patience. Confident you have a plan, stick to the plan as best as you can, and learn and iterate, and then figure out how to amplify.
Yeah.
And then on the
Yeah.
outside of that, do some crazy things just to test them, right? Just
Yeah.
drop like, what did you do over here? Oh, I did that. Because you also never know what's going to make you go crazy.
Yeah, a couple ideas come to mind to build on that. I saw one of the co-founders of Airbnb speak at a conference years ago, and they almost went out of business several times when they were trying to start it up. I mean, they were really not meant to be. And he used the phrase cockroach mode. He goes, we just had to outlast and keep living. And I think at the beginning, even in the $3 million mark, like just building that business intentionally in cockroach mode, but then making some smart investments and committing to them and being patient. Like media spend's a good one. Like my advice would be build it into the business operations, like a media budget, and don't cut it. Just be like, this is what we're spending on media, and put the pressure on making it work, the whole blended CAC or all that. But it's like, no,
Right.
we're spending this percentage of our revenue on media every year, every quarter, or whatever. And we just got to be efficient with it. So that's comes to mind.
Yeah. And there's no lack of, certainly in today's world, there's certainly no lack of learning.
Yeah.
And that's a good and a bad, right? Because you could be in spreadsheets all day long trying to figure stuff out, right? And as data gets flattened and averaged and whatever, you kind of miss some opportunities to be where there is opportunity. And so I would say, part of that patience is, when I say learning, it's don't necessarily like open up the 7 tabs of a spreadsheet and go, where's the opportunity, but kind of look at, okay, where's the trend? Creative is at least 50% of that media plan, by the way, right? And so what's the message, having the varying messages out there to see what's working, what's not working. But you can definitely get lost in data. You should definitely have a really good data analyst who loves getting lost in that data, but then synthesizes it and crystallizes it back to you and go, oh, here's some action items I think you should do.
Yeah, we talked a lot about just prioritization. And one of the ones that is missed when you're coming up with like strategies or tactics for the business is impact. Like I learned from another mentor when I was a data analyst, like the worst words you can hear from somebody when you're an analyst is, oh, that'd be interesting to see. And Tom McKendrick, he is the man. And he said, whenever you hear those words, because you will, just you need to push back and say, if I show you that data, what action will you take based on the results of my findings? Because oftentimes it's, oh, nothing. I'll just be interesting. I'll be, maybe I'll seem smart in a meeting. Yeah. And it's so impact is the one that's always missed. So it's like, oh, if we find this out, is it going to affect the lives of 100 customers or 1 million customers? So that would be the other one of just prioritizing.
Yeah.
Oh man, we've said it all.
That's great. This was great. I appreciate the invite. Wonderful meeting you, Zoe. Thank you.
Lovely
Is there
meeting
anything
you,
that we
Ernest.
didn't ask that we should have asked or people should know?
No. Well, I mean, to your point, we could go on all day. I will say, particularly in the field you guys are in and any agencies in, obviously the fear of AI, creativity, and automation and all that kind of stuff. But I've my own POV on that, which we can probably do for another one. But I'm more excited about it. I'm definitely excited about the creative opportunity, and frankly, the grunt side of production that can happily be handed to the robots. That'll just allows more creativity and more opportunity, and that's the kind of stuff I would definitely touch on, down the road, and excited to learn more about myself.
Yeah, we'll have to go into that. I just posted a quote from Sam Altman on LinkedIn where he's like,
in the past, the technical guys in like the startup worlds, like the developers used to laugh at the idea guys. Like, oh, there's look at there, another idea guy trying to look for somebody to build his idea. What a loser.
Mhm.
And he goes, I think the idea guys are gonna maybe come out on top here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a great way to put it, because that's, somebody, to me, as I mentioned, I know a little about a lot of things. I can't necessarily, without a lot of rewiring and learning, go make my ideas happen. Well, now I can. And I got a million ideas, and I have even more outlets now to get those things out of my head.
Yeah, we're having the same sentiment over here of just, it's maybe could be famous last words, but it does seem that AI is actually just it's gonna push it's gonna raise the bar and push it to the middle, push the average right to the middle of like, okay, now the average ad, the average creative will probably have good fundamentals. It'll probably look half decent, but everything's going to start looking the same, because it's just going to start modeling after itself, and snake will eat its tail. And, again, could be famous last words. You can get some pretty wild stuff if you're good at prompting.
Well, and so the prompting, like, there was no sort of such thing as a, digital ad manager a while ago. There was no such thing as a social media influencer a while ago. So it'll kill jobs, but it'll certainly create jobs. And I've got 2 kids graduating college. And the first thing I've said to them is, just like cable wasn't a fad, internet wasn't a fad, social media wasn't a fad, AI ain't a fad. Right? You better figure it out, and figure it out quick. And it has pros and cons like everything else did, of I think of innovations in the past. So, but it's definitely one that is getting a lot of attention and growing very fast, and more applicable, I think, to our field than anything historically. Even though digital and social media were a big part of marketing, AI is having a huge part in what we do.
Yeah, obviously the most visible to everybody too. Even my dad,
Right.
who's just has Fox News on repeat, he's just like, AI is really affecting your business, isn't it? It's the Shane Gillis quote. He watches Fox News till he can't.
Yeah. That's funny. And not to go down the rabbit hole, parents, but this is the first time my parents have had to deal with a son who doesn't have a job. Right. And for them at, 70 plus years old to call me and go, well, have you filled out all the applications you need? And to, have you, it just like it took me to go carry my attache case and resumes and go knock on a bunch of doors in the neighborhood. Like, that's how
you
they
better
expect
be
me to go find a
walking into
job. Yeah.
offices. You better be going and talking to
I love it when
whoever's at the front desk.
Parents call you with advice like, are you doing everything you can to look for a job? Yes.
Now we're just spiraling into silliness, but it's almost like we have a 15-month-old daughter, and her grandparents coming in. You've been out of the game for nearly 40 years. You don't know how to do this job anymore.
What do you bring it? Yeah.
She's like, a month old. Like, have you given her water? I'm like, you don't do that anymore.
Yeah. Look.
All right, man. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll have to do it again.
Yeah. Bring it out. Let's get you more than net zero followers, or not watchers.
So I told
I'm happy.
Michael was texting. He's like, what should I prep? I go, we could talk about anything. We have approximately 0 listeners.
Well, hopefully we boosted a few more after this one. But it's been such a pleasure speaking with you, especially just as a mentor of CJ, because CJ is such a great mentor of mine. And I just think, it's just been really cool to see a lot of CJ's learnings, obviously from you, trickle down and pass along to us and our agency. So really appreciate the time speaking with you.
Great. Thank you. And proud of you, CJ. It's great to see you again. And we'll definitely go have another beer. And Zoe, good luck to you working for this guy and everything you've got, because one day, I guess, like on my screen, you'll be over here and talking to somebody you mentored, who will be talking to somebody they mentored. And you'll feel pretty good. Am I grand mentor? Is that what that means?
Yeah, we'll be a couple of geezers.
Don't start talking about my future agency I'm going to create to CJ. Biggest takeaway.
Right.
Yeah.
Although he should feel proud, you're already thinking about it.
Exactly.
Yeah, true story. All right, man.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks. Bye, guys.